In 1994, the United States Congress passed a single piece of legislation that redrew the line between food and medicine. The Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act told the Food and Drug Administration to regulate health claims on food with the same scrutiny it applied to pharmaceuticals. Overnight, a kitchen remedy your grandmother spooned from a clay jar became, in regulatory language, an unapproved drug claim. A clove of something simmering on the back of the stove was not a drug. A jar fermenting in a dark cupboard for 30 days was not a drug. A pot left on a low flame for 2 days straight was not a drug. So the agency stopped talking about any of it. Within a decade, the supplement aisle exploded with capsules, extracts, and powders, each one marketed around the regulation, not through it. The Whole Foods those capsules were trying to imitate sat quietly in the produce section, unmarketed, unpatented, and ignored. But here is the part nobody talks about. Starting in the early 2000s, peer-reviewed journals began publishing study after study confirming what an ancient shepherd eating from his own field already knew. The same food Scripture singled out by name, modern immunology has quietly singled out too, for reasons no one in 1950 had the tools to measure. This is a list of those foods prepared the way they were meant to be prepared, in recipes old enough to predate every pharmacy on Earth. And every single one of them is something you could make this week. Number 14 on this list pairs two ingredients the Bible mentions on nearly every other page. For most of the 20th century, the pairing was dismissed as folk superstition, a grandmother's placebo. Then a peer-reviewed immunology trial made the folk healers look like prophets, and the silence from the agency that should have told you was deafening. Number 3 requires 48 hours and a single pot your great-grandmother would have recognized, and it yields something no capsule on a pharmacy shelf has been able to replicate. Modern supplement companies have spent 2 decades trying to bottle what this recipe produces in a single simmer. They have failed. These 20 recipes are not supplements. They are not extracts. They are whole meals, assembled from ingredients that appear in Scripture, prepared in ways that kept entire civilizations alive before the first antibiotic was ever synthesized. Every one of them you could prepare in a home kitchen with tools you already own. The Food and Drug Administration built a regulatory architecture that classified whole food health claims as drug claims, and the processed food industry filled the silence with 60 years of marketing. Nobody patented a lentil. Nobody ran a primetime commercial for a pot of grain simmering with herbs. The foods that could not generate a revenue stream were regulated into silence, and the products that could were given the microphone. Most people will scroll past this and never hear a single one of these recipes. You are still here. That tells me something. Let us begin. Before we start, hit subscribe. This channel exists to recover what the system made unprofitable to remember. If that matters to you, subscribing keeps these videos in front of you. 20 biblical recipes, each one backed by modern immunology, each one erased from the conversation by economics. Let us count down. Number 20. Herbal olive oil drizzle. In the excavations at Tel Megiddo, archaeologists recovered olive pressing installations dating to roughly 4,500 before the Common Era, among the oldest evidence of systematic oil production on Earth. By the time the Hebrew Bible was being written, olive oil was not a luxury. It was a daily utility. Lamp fuel, wound balm, cooking fat, and the base note of nearly every meal. The recipe is almost embarrassingly simple. Crush fresh parsley, mint, and oregano into a mortar. Fold the bruised leaves into a cup of cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil with a clove of raw garlic and a pinch of coarse salt. The oil pulls volatile polyphenols from the herb cell walls within minutes. Hydroxytyrosol, the headline polyphenol in extra virgin olive oil, has demonstrated antioxidant and anti-inflammatory activity in peer-reviewed trials. And combining it with the additional phenolic compounds from fresh herbs amplifies the total polyphenol load of a single tablespoon drizzled over bread, fish, or grain. The modern cooking oil aisle replaced this with refined seed oil stripped of every bioactive compound the ancients prized, and the processed oil industry sold it back to you at a higher margin with a heart health label. A tablespoon of green gold oil over a torn piece of flatbread. That was supper for a shepherd 3,000 years ago. The next item was his breakfast. Number 19. Seasonal fruit plate with nuts and honey. The Song of Solomon names figs, grapes, and pomegranates in the same breath as desire itself. Chapter 2, Verse 13. These were not metaphors. They were the harvest calendar of a Bronze Age household where fresh fruit, dried nuts, and a drizzle of wild honey constituted the first meal of the day. A plate of sliced figs, a handful of grapes, a scattering of pomegranate arils, a few raw almonds or walnuts, and a thin ribbon of raw honey. The figs deliver prebiotic fiber, roughly 1.9 grams per medium fig, feeding the lactobacillus and bifidobacterium colonies that line the gut wall. Pomegranate arils carry L-gitannins, polyphenols that gut bacteria convert into urolithins, compounds shown in 2019 research to support mitochondrial function in immune cells. The walnuts contribute alpha-linolenic acid, a plant-based omega-3, and the honey seals it with a broad-spectrum antioxidant finish. Its phenolic profile varies by floral source, but raw unfiltered honey consistently outperforms refined sugar on every oxidative stress marker measured. The cereal industry spent the 20th century convincing families that a bowl of fortified grain dust with synthetic vitamins was a superior morning meal. The fruit plate needed no fortification. It arrived complete. That plate cost less than $1 in most grocery stores today. The next item costs even less, and it has been feeding armies since Genesis. Number 18. Simple chickpea and herb salad. Chickpeas appear in archaeological deposits at Tel el-Kirk in modern Syria dated to approximately 7500 before the Common Era, making them one of the first domesticated legumes on record. By the biblical period, they were a field staple across the Fertile Crescent. Cheap, storable through drought, and dense enough in protein and iron to sustain a laborer through a 14-hour harvest day. Toss cooked chickpeas with cold-pressed olive oil, the juice of 1 lemon, 2 crushed garlic cloves, and a generous handful of chopped flat-leaf parsley and fresh mint. The chickpeas alone deliver roughly 12.5 grams of fiber and 14.5 grams of plant protein per cup. The fiber feeding beneficial gut bacteria and the protein supplying the amino acid precursors that immune cells burn through during an active response. The lemon adds approximately 30 milligrams of vitamin C per fruit, enhancing non-heme iron absorption from the legumes by up to 3-fold. The garlic contributes sulfur compounds with documented antimicrobial properties. Processed food marketing replaced the legume bowl with protein bars wrapped in foil and flavored with chemicals no shepherd could pronounce. A salad this simple should not survive 3,000 years of culinary evolution. The next item almost did not, because someone decided its key ingredient was too bitter for modern palates. Number 17. Sautéed bitter greens with garlic and olive oil. The Passover Seder includes maror, bitter herbs, as a ritual requirement codified in Exodus 12, verse 8. But the bitterness was not merely symbolic. Wild chicory, endive, dandelion greens, and mustard leaves were daily forage across the ancient Near East, and their sharp flavors signaled a dense concentration of the very compounds modern nutrition now calls phytonutrients. Heat 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil in a wide pan. Add 3 or 4 crushed garlic cloves and let them sizzle. 45 seconds, no more, until fragrant. Add a large bunch of washed bitter greens, dandelion, mustard, or mature spinach. Splash in a 1/4 cup of water, cover, and steam for 5 to 7 minutes until wilted. Bitter greens are dense in folate, vitamin K, and vitamin A precursors. A single cup of cooked dandelion greens supplies over 100% of the daily value for vitamins A and K. The bitterness itself comes from sesquiterpene lactones, compounds with demonstrated anti-inflammatory activity in cell culture studies. The modern produce section bred bitterness out of lettuce and spinach to suit a palate trained on sugar. The nutrients left with the flavor. Bitterness was not a flaw, it was a signal. The next item carries a different signal, color, and the ancient cooks read it just as fluently. Number 16. Roasted root vegetables with olive oil and herbs. Carrots, in their earliest domesticated form, appeared in Persia around the 10th century, but the broader category, starchy orange flesh roots and tubers, was dug from the fields of the ancient Near East for millennia before that. The Torah references field produce repeatedly, and roasting in a clay oven was the simplest preparation available to any household with a hearth. Cut carrots, winter squash, and onions into rough chunks. Toss with olive oil, a scatter of dried thyme and oregano, and a pinch of sea salt. Roast in a hot oven, or as the ancients did, in the retained heat of a clay tabboon, until the edges caramelize and the centers turn soft. Carrots and orange squash are among the richest dietary sources of beta-carotene, the precursor the body converts to vitamin A. A single cup of cooked carrots delivers over 400% of the daily recommended intake of vitamin A. And vitamin A is not optional for immunity. It maintains the integrity of mucosal barriers in the gut, lungs, and nasal passages, the body's first contact surfaces where pathogens attempt entry. The olive oil is not decoration. Beta-carotene is fat-soluble. Without the accompanying fat, absorption drops dramatically. The supplement industry isolated beta-carotene into a pill and sold it for decades, until two large-scale trials in the 1990s found that the synthetic isolate, stripped of its whole food matrix, not only failed to protect, but in some populations increased risk. The roasted carrot never had that problem. Color was the ancient cook's nutrition label. Orange meant one thing. The pale grain in the next item meant something else entirely, and immunologists did not decode it until the 21st century. Number 15. Biblical breakfast grain porridge. Ruth gleaned barley from the fields of Boaz in Bethlehem. The name itself, Beit Lechem, translates to house of bread. Barley was the poor person's grain, cheaper than wheat, and the foundation of the morning meal across ancient Israel. A clay pot, water, heat, and a handful of barley. That was breakfast. Simmer whole grain barley in water or broth until it softens into a thick, starchy porridge, roughly 45 minutes over low heat. Top with dried figs, a handful of walnuts, and a drizzle of raw honey. Optionally, stir in a spoonful of fermented yogurt for a probiotic addition. Barley is one of the richest cereal sources of beta-glucans, soluble fibers that form a gel in the gut, and have been identified in immunology literature as biological response modifiers. Beta-glucans bind to receptors on macrophages and dendritic cells, priming them for faster pathogen recognition. A 2020 review in the journal Nutrients confirmed that regular dietary beta-glucan intake modulates both innate and adaptive immune responses. 1 cup of cooked barley delivers approximately 2.5 grams of beta-glucans. The cereal companies milled the beta-glucan out to improve shelf life and texture, then stamped whole grain on the box. The regulatory definition let them do it. A grain that teaches your immune cells to recognize threats faster. The ancients ate it because it was cheap. The next item they made because they had no refrigerator, and that constraint produced something a laboratory still cannot fully replicate. Number 14. Fermented honey garlic. Garlic appears alongside Egypt's staple foods in Numbers 11, verse 5. Honey saturates the biblical narrative from Exodus forward. The promised land flows with it. Both were preserved, traded, and administered as remedies across the ancient Near East for centuries. But the combination, raw garlic submerged in raw honey and left to ferment in a sealed vessel, was a preparation method documented in traditional medicine systems from the Levant to the Caucasus. A method that the 20th century medical establishment dismissed as folk superstition for over 60 years. Fill a clean glass jar with peeled garlic cloves. Cover them completely in raw, unfiltered honey. Cap the jar loosely. Fermentation produces gas, and store it in a cool, dark place. Flip the jar every 2 days to keep the cloves submerged. Over approximately 30 days, the honey thins, the garlic softens, and a slow lactofermentation transforms the chemistry of both ingredients. The garlic's allicin breaks down into sulfur compounds, including S-allylcysteine and ajuine, that peer-reviewed research has shown to enhance natural killer cell activity and modulate cytokine production. A 2012 clinical trial published in Clinical Nutrition found that aged garlic extract significantly increased the proliferation of gamma-delta T cells and natural killer cells in human subjects, while simultaneously reducing the severity and duration of cold and flu symptoms. The honey contributes its own broad-spectrum antimicrobial activity, its low water activity, hydrogen peroxide production, and acidic pH create an environment hostile to pathogenic bacteria while supporting the beneficial fermentation. The synergy is not additive. It is multiplicative. The fermentation process produces compounds neither ingredient contains alone. For decades, the same agency that approved synthetic cold medications with multi-page side effect sheets classified this preparation as an unapproved remedy. The folk healers who made it were dismissed. The peer review that vindicated them arrived quietly, without a press conference, without a marketing budget. A jar, 30 days, and 2 ingredients old enough to appear in scripture. The next item needs no fermentation, only a blade, a flame, and whatever the field had to offer that morning. Number 13. Carrot ginger soup with biblical-based vegetables. Northwestern Health Sciences University includes a carrot ginger soup in its published roster of immune-supportive recipes. A modern clinical recommendation that mirrors a preparation style documented across the medieval Islamic medical texts that inherited much of the Levantine culinary tradition. Sauté diced onion and 3 cloves of garlic in olive oil until translucent. Add a pound of chopped carrots and a thumb-sized piece of fresh ginger, peeled and sliced. Cover with broth and simmer for 25 minutes until the carrots collapse. Blend until smooth. Finish with a drizzle of olive oil and a pinch of cumin. The carrots deliver beta-carotene. The ginger provides gingerols, phenolic compounds with demonstrated anti-inflammatory action that inhibit the NF-kappa B signaling pathway, a master regulator of the inflammatory response. The garlic and onion contribute organosulfur compounds, and the olive oil ensures the fat-soluble nutrients are bioavailable. Canned soup replaced this in the American pantry, shelf-stable, sodium-loaded, stripped of volatile compounds that degrade during industrial processing. The convenience was real. The immune support was not. A bright orange bowl with enough anti-inflammatory activity to rival a capsule. The next item is the opposite. Pale, plain, and ancient enough to appear in Chinese medical texts and Levantine kitchens simultaneously. Number 12. Congee-style barley porridge with herbs. Traditional Chinese medicine has prescribed rice congee as a recovery food for centuries. Replace the rice with barley and season with garlic, thyme, and olive oil, and you arrive at a preparation that would have been recognizable in any ancient Israelite household recovering from illness. The concept is identical across cultures. A long-cooked grain broth, easy to digest, administered to the sick. Cook 1 cup of whole barley in 6 cups of water or broth over the lowest possible flame for 90 minutes to 2 hours. Until the grain dissolves into a thick, starchy porridge. Stir in minced garlic, a sprig of fresh thyme, and a generous pour of olive oil. The extended cooking time ruptures barley's cell walls and releases a high concentration of soluble beta-glucans into the liquid, turning the broth itself into an immunomodulatory vehicle. This is a food designed for a compromised digestive system. The near-total breakdown of the grain means the gut expends minimal energy on digestion, while absorbing maximum nutrition. Modern sick day protocol replaced this with electrolyte drinks, engineered in a lab, and crackers made from refined flour. Foods that address hydration and little else. A porridge that heals by doing less, not more. The next item does the opposite. It puts the whole Mediterranean table on a single plate and dares you to eat it with your hands. Number 11. Olive oil and herb dipping plate with whole grain bread. The Last Supper was, at its most literal, a meal of bread and wine shared among friends at a table. Bread dipped in olive oil was not ceremonial. It was the default delivery mechanism for fat, polyphenols, and flavor in the ancient Mediterranean, as routine as a fork is today. Pour a shallow pool of extra virgin olive oil onto a plate, scatter it with crushed garlic, dried oregano, za'atar, and a pinch of coarse sea salt. Tear a piece of whole grain barley or emmer wheat flatbread and drag it through the oil. The combination delivers monounsaturated fats, phenolic antioxidants from the oil, volatile thymol and carvacrol from the oregano and za'atar, compounds with documented antimicrobial and anti-inflammatory activity, and the fiber and beta-glucans from the whole grain. 1 tablespoon of quality extra virgin olive oil contains roughly 5 milligrams of hydroxytyrosol, one of the most potent natural antioxidants measured. The bread basket at a modern restaurant gives you refined white flour and butter-flavored spread. The polyphenols vanished with the milling. The hydroxytyrosol was never invited. Bread, oil, herbs, hands. The simplest meal in the Bible may also be the most pharmacologically dense. The next item moves from the table to the vineyard, and the colors on the plate shift from gold to deep red. Number 10. Grape and pomegranate salad with herbs. The 12 spies sent into Canaan returned carrying a single cluster of grapes so large it required 2 men and a pole to transport it. Numbers 13, verse 23. The pomegranate was embroidered onto the hem of the high priest's robe. These were not incidental fruits. They were national symbols, harvest trophies, and, as modern research now confirms, concentrated packages of immune-relevant polyphenols. Have a generous handful of grapes, scatter them with pomegranate arils, torn fresh mint, and flat-leaf parsley. Add toasted walnuts for fat and texture. Dress with olive oil and a squeeze of lemon. Grapes deliver resveratrol, a stilbenoid polyphenol with demonstrated immunomodulatory and anti-inflammatory properties. Pomegranate arils are dense in ellagitannins, which gut bacteria metabolize into urolithins. A 2019 study in Nature Medicine linked urolithin A to improved mitochondrial function, directly relevant to immune cells, which are among the most metabolically active cells in the body and depend on efficient mitochondria to mount effective responses. The juice industry crushed these fruits into pasteurized sugar water, stripped the fiber and most of the polyphenols, and marketed the result as health food. The whole fruit, eaten raw with its skin and seeds, delivers what the bottle cannot. Red, purple, and green on a single plate, each color a different class of polyphenol. The next item goes back to brown, back to the pot, back to the kind of soup that sustained a family through a siege. Number 9. Hearty vegetable and lentil soup. 2 Samuel 17 verses 28 through 29 lists the provisions brought to David's army during Absalom's rebellion. Wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, lentils, honey, curds, sheep, and cheese. It reads like a supply manifest, and at its center, lentils and field vegetables, the caloric backbone of a military campaign fed without refrigeration or supply chains. Sauté diced onion, garlic, and carrot in olive oil. Add a cup of dried lentils, a handful of chopped leafy greens, kale, chard, or spinach, and cover with broth. Season with cumin, coriander, and a bay leaf. Simmer for 30 minutes. The lentils contribute approximately 18 grams of protein and 15 grams of fiber per cup cooked, fiber that feeds bifidobacterium colonies in the colon and supports the production of short-chain fatty acids like butyrate, a primary fuel for colonocytes and a known modulator of intestinal immune response. The leafy greens add folate, vitamin C, and iron. The garlic and onion add sulfur compounds. The olive oil adds polyphenols. Every ingredient in the pot is pulling immunological weight. Ready-made soup in a can replace this, with sodium levels above 800 milligrams per serving, heat-degraded vitamins, and fiber content a fraction of the original. The convenience came at a cost the label did not disclose. A pot that feeds an army and fortifies every immune cell in it. The next item thickens the pot further. Grain meets legume, and the combination unlocks something neither can do alone. Number 8. Spiced lentil barley soup. The pairing of legume and grain is not an accident of taste. It is a biochemical strategy documented in every major ancient agricultural civilization. Mesoamerican beans and corn, East Asian rice and soy, and in the Levant, lentils and barley. The biblical diet defaulted to this combination not because of nutritional science, but because bodies that ate it survived winters that bodies eating grain alone did not. Cook equal parts lentils and barley in broth with onion, garlic, carrot, cumin, coriander, black pepper, and a bay leaf. Simmer until both grain and legume dissolve into a thick, almost porridge-like consistency, roughly 40 minutes. The lentils supply lysine, the amino acid barley lacks. The barley supplies methionine, the amino acid lentils lack. Together they form a complete protein, every essential amino acid represented, without animal product. Immune cells undergoing clonal expansion during an active infection have enormous protein demands, and a complete amino acid profile matters. Meanwhile, the barley's beta-glucans and the lentils' prebiotic fiber are both present, feeding the gut microbiome from two different fiber fractions simultaneously. Add cumin and coriander, both members of the Apiaceae family, and you introduce additional volatile oils with documented antioxidant activity. The protein bar industry spends billions marketing isolated amino acids in synthetic matrices. A 40-minute pot of lentils and barley delivers the same amino acid profile in a whole food matrix the gut was designed to process, and has been processing for 10,000 years. Grain plus legume, the oldest complete protein on Earth. The next item takes the Bible's other staple protein, the one pulled from the Sea of Galilee, and pairs it with the same herbs and oil that appear in nearly every item on this list. Number 7. Fish with garlic, herbs, and olive oil. The resurrected Christ's first recorded meal was grilled fish on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Luke 24 verses 42 through 43, and John 21 verses 9 through 13. Tilapia, now marketed globally as a farmed commodity, was the native catch of that lake. The meal was not symbolic. It was sustenance, a fire, a fish, and whatever the garden provided. Lay a whole fish or fillets on a bed of sliced lemon. Rub with crushed garlic, fresh dill or thyme, and a generous coat of olive oil. Bake at moderate heat for 20 minutes or grill over coals. Fatty fish, sardines, mackerel, and wild-caught salmon, the modern equivalents of ancient Galilean catches, deliver EPA and DHA, long-chain omega-3 fatty acids, with robust evidence for modulating the inflammatory response. EPA and DHA are incorporated directly into immune cell membranes, where they influence the production of resolvins and protectins, specialized pro-resolving mediators that help terminate inflammation after an immune response, preventing the chronic low-grade inflammation that degrades immune readiness over time. The garlic and herbs add their own immunomodulatory compounds. The olive oil contributes polyphenols and ensures fat-soluble nutrient absorption. The fish stick industry breaded and deep-fried the omega-3s into irrelevance, then froze the result in a box decorated with a cartoon captain. The omega-3 content of a commercial fish stick is a fraction of a simply baked fillet. The inflammation balance shifted with the breading, a fire, a fish, and a handful of herbs. The apostles ate this meal and then walked the Roman Empire. The next item pairs two foods from opposite ends of the harvest, one dug from the earth, one picked from the vine, and the combination targets a nutrient most modern diets miss entirely. Number 6. Lentil pumpkin salad. Gourds and squashes appear in biblical references to field produce. Jonah's gourd, the wild gourds of 2 Kings 4 verse 39. Pumpkin and squash were cultivated broadly across the ancient Near East. Paired with lentils, they form a dish documented in variations from modern Israeli cuisine back to medieval Arabic cookbooks that drew on the same Levantine culinary grammar. Roast cubed pumpkin or butternut squash in olive oil until caramelized, roughly 30 minutes at high heat. Toss the worn cubes with cooked lentils, a handful of fresh herbs, parsley, mint, and a dressing of olive oil, lemon juice, and a pinch of cumin. The squash delivers a concentrated payload of beta-carotene. 1 cup of cooked butternut squash provides over 450% of the daily recommended vitamin A intake. The lentils bring fiber, folate, and iron. Vitamin A and iron are codependent in immune function. Vitamin A regulates iron metabolism, and iron is essential for the rapid proliferation of lymphocytes during infection. A deficiency in either nutrient impairs the other's function. This salad addresses both in a single plate. The supplement industry sells vitamin A and iron as separate capsules, often synthetic, often poorly absorbed without dietary fat. The lentil pumpkin salad delivers both in their natural forms, embedded in a fat matrix, olive oil, that ensures absorption. The ancient pairing was not accidental. It was nutritional engineering before the word existed. But here is the part they do not tell you. The next item harnesses something older than cooking itself, bacterial cultures, and pairs it with the most famous sweetener in all of Scripture. Number 5, milk and honey probiotic bowl. The phrase, "a land flowing with milk and honey," appears over 20 times in the Hebrew Bible. It was the single most repeated economic promise in all of Scripture, not gold, not silver, but fermented dairy and wild honey. Abraham served curds and milk to the 3 visitors at Mamre in Genesis 18 verse 8. The curds were not fresh milk. They were cultured, alive with bacterial colonies that the ancients could not see but whose effects they could measure in the gut. Spoon thick plain yogurt made with live cultures, Lactobacillus bulgaricus and Streptococcus thermophilus at minimum, into a bowl. Drizzle with raw unfiltered honey. Add pomegranate arils, sliced figs, and a few walnuts. The yogurt delivers probiotics directly to the gut, where they interact with gut-associated lymphoid tissue, the largest concentration of immune cells in the body, accounting for roughly 70% of the immune system's total cellularity. A 2015 meta-analysis in the British Journal of Nutrition found that regular probiotic consumption reduced the incidence and duration of upper respiratory tract infections. The honey contributes prebiotic oligosaccharides that selectively feed beneficial bacterial strains, creating a symbiotic effect, the probiotic organisms and their preferred fuel source arriving in the same spoonful. The dairy industry replaced cultured living yogurt with sugar-loaded flavored products, containing so many grams of added sweetener per serving that the probiotic benefit is offset by the metabolic damage. The yogurt aisle in a modern grocery store is, in most cases, a dessert aisle wearing a lab coat. Milk and honey, the oldest promise in the Bible and one of the most immunologically sophisticated pairings modern science has measured. The next item goes back to the grain field, to a dish thick enough to feed a prophet through a famine. Number 4. Barley and vegetable pottage. In 2 Kings 4 verses 38 through 41, the prophet Elisha orders a large pot of stew to feed the sons of the prophets during a famine. The base was field vegetables and grain, a pottage, the single most common hot meal in the ancient Near East. The word appears repeatedly in the King James translation. Pottage, a thick, slow-cooked, one-pot meal built from whatever the field and pantry could provide. Cooked barley in broth with diced onion, garlic, carrots, and whatever greens are available, chard, kale, beet tops, wild herbs. Add cumin and a generous pour of olive oil. Simmer until the barley swells and thickens the liquid into a stew consistency. This is the maximum coverage immune support recipe on this list. Beta-glucans from barley for innate immune priming. Fiber from vegetables for microbiome support. Vitamin A precursors from the carrots and greens for mucosal barrier integrity. Sulfur compounds from the garlic and onion for antimicrobial activity. Polyphenols from the olive oil for inflammation modulation. And a complete B vitamin spectrum from the combined plant sources. Every major nutritional pathway relevant to immune function is addressed in a single pot that cost almost nothing to make. The processed food industry replaced the pottage with microwavable single-serve meals, each one optimized for shelf life, not for the gut microbiome. The sodium is higher, the fiber is lower, the beta-glucans are absent. The cost, adjusted for inflation, is often greater. The only thing the microwave meal does better is save time, and the time it saves, the body pays for later. A single pot that addresses every immune pathway modern nutrition has identified. But here is what no one tells you. The next item on this list addresses something even that pot cannot, and it requires 48 hours of patience to make. Number 3, immune-supporting bone broth. Bone broth, the extraction of collagen, minerals, and amino acids from animal bones through prolonged simmering, is documented in virtually every culinary tradition that kept livestock. In the ancient Levant, where no part of a slaughtered animal was wasted, the bones were the last resource. They went into the pot after the meat was gone, and what they yielded over 24 to 48 hours was a liquid the ancients treated as medicine, roast beef or chicken bones until browned. Place them in a large pot, cover with cold water, and add a splash of vinegar. The acid draws calcium, magnesium, and phosphorus from the bone matrix. Add onion, garlic, and a bay leaf. Bring to a bare simmer and hold it there. For chicken, 12 to 24 hours. For beef, 24 to 48 hours. Strain, season. What remains is a liquid dense with type 2 collagen, gelatin, glycine, proline, and glutamine, amino acids that play direct roles in gut barrier maintenance and immune cell function. Glycine has demonstrated anti-inflammatory properties in multiple peer-reviewed studies, modulating cytokine release from macrophages. Glutamine is the preferred fuel source for enterocytes, the cells lining the small intestine, and for rapidly dividing lymphocytes during immune activation. The gelatin, when cooled, solidifies into a gel, a visual confirmation that the collagen extraction was successful. No commercial supplement has replicated the full amino acid and mineral profile of a properly made bone broth. The collagen peptides sold in powder form are hydrolyzed fragments, pieces of what the broth delivers whole. The $30 canister on the supplement shelf is a partial imitation of a preparation that costs less than $2 in bones and time. The supplement industry spent 2 decades attempting to bottle this. They produced collagen powders, gelatin supplements, glutamine isolates, and glycine tablets, each one sold separately, none of them replicating the synergistic matrix of the whole broth. That same agency that would not let your grandmother's kitchen claim any health benefit granted shelf space and implicit legitimacy to every one of those fragmentary imitations. 48 hours, a pot, a handful of bones your grocer throws away. That is what no capsule can replicate. 2 items remain, and the next one might be the most surprising because it asks you to do nothing more than boil water. Number 2, Herbal Infusion Wellness Tea. Northwestern Health Sciences University, a modern clinical institution, publishes a ginger lemon wellness tea as one of its frontline immune supportive recommendations. The preparation is essentially identical to the herbal infusions documented in Talmudic medical literature and across the medieval Islamic pharmacopoeias that preserved Levantine herbal knowledge through the centuries. The recipe has not changed because the chemistry has not changed. Slice a thumb-sized piece of fresh ginger root. Place it in a cup of just boiled water with the juice of half a lemon. Steep for 3 to 5 minutes. Optionally, stir in a half teaspoon of raw honey once the liquid cools below 40 degrees Celsius, preserving the honey's heat-sensitive enzymes. The ginger provides gingerols and shogols, compounds that inhibit prostaglandin synthesis and the NF-kappa B inflammatory pathway, the same pathway targeted by ibuprofen, though through a different mechanism. The lemon contributes vitamin C, roughly 15 milligrams per half fruit, and flavonoids including hesperidin, which has shown antiviral properties in vitro. The honey, if added, supplies additional antimicrobial phenolics and soothes inflamed throat tissue through a physical coating mechanism that clinical trials have found comparable in efficacy to dextromethorphan for nocturnal cough in children. The cold remedy industry sells multi-symptom capsules containing synthetic analogs of these exact pathways, synthetic anti-inflammatories, synthetic cough suppressants, synthetic vitamin C combined with artificial flavors, dyes, and fillers. A cup of ginger lemon tea addresses the same symptoms through whole food chemistry, without the side effect profile, without the packaging, and at a fraction of the cost. The industry never mentions it. The profit margin on a ginger root is too thin to warrant a television commercial. A cup of hot water, a root, and a lemon. That is number 2. One remains, and it is not the rarest, the strangest, or the most expensive. It is the one that started everything. Number 1. Lentil stew with garlic and herbs. Genesis 25 verse 34 records the oldest named recipe in the Bible. Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew. Esau ate and drank, rose, and went his way. 1 sentence, 1 meal. The stew was so ordinary the author did not bother to describe it, which tells you how deeply it was woven into daily life. A handful of red lentils, onion, garlic, cumin, olive oil, water, heat. That is the recipe. It has not changed in 4,000 years because it did not need to. The lentils break down into a thick, earthy porridge, the color of clay, the smell of a field after rain. The garlic softens. The cumin blooms in the oil. The steam rises from the pot the way it rose from pots in Hebron, in Ur, in every settlement along the Fertile Crescent where a family had a fire and a handful of dried legumes. Every immune pathway this list has named converges in this single bowl. Fiber for the microbiome, sulfur compounds for antimicrobial defense, polyphenols for inflammation, complete mineral spectrum for barrier integrity. It is not exotic. It is not rare. It is the opposite. It is the most common meal in the history of the human species. The modern food system did not ban this stew. It did something more effective. It made it invisible. It filled the shelf with faster options, louder packaging, and brighter colors until the clay-colored pot of lentils looked like poverty instead of wisdom. That was the real suppression. Not a law, a marketing budget. 4,000 years. 1 pot. The same steam rising from the same recipe in a kitchen that looks nothing like Jacob's tent, and yet the body responds the same way. That is what they made you forget. That is what this list exists to return. 20 recipes. Not one of them required a patent, a prescription, or a factory. Every one of them existed before the first pharmaceutical company filed its first trademark. What began with a regulatory pen stroke in 1994 was not a conspiracy. It was something quieter and more effective, an economic architecture that made it unprofitable to talk about food as medicine and then waited for the silence to do the forgetting. The forgetting was not natural. It was purchased, but silence only works when nobody breaks it. You just sat through 20 recipes that break it. The question now is whether any of them leave this screen and enter your kitchen. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. Just one. The chickpea salad takes 10 minutes. The herbal olive oil drizzle takes 5. The lentil stew takes 30 minutes and a single pot. Pick one, make it, see what happens. I made the lentil stew on a Tuesday night with ingredients that cost me under $3. My grandmother would not have called it a recipe. She would have called it Tuesday. Tell me in the comments which one you are going to make first. I want to know if the fermented honey garlic gets more love than the lentil stew. 2 camps.